I have known Aaron and Amy Dorman for over 25 years. I was their youth group leader when I first met them. Since then, we have had babies together, and our families have been very, very close.
I've known the Dormans since probably around the late 80s. Lesta and I moved back to Estes Park, and we started working with the youth group, and Amy and Aaron would attend. They're in high school.
I've been working with Amy Dorman as her primary care physician since about 2007. She actually came to see me for problems that ultimately were diagnosed as autoimmune disease, and she's suffered with this condition ever since I've known her.
Our family isn't new to medical difficulties. When we first got married, Amy struggled with some strep and some things that became more systemic, and battled that for several years. And we were able to get that addressed, and that was great. And then we had about 4 years of really great health. We would walk every afternoon, hikes, would go to the gym, play tennis. It was great. But then when my son was born, the first 3 months he was developing just fine, and then all of a sudden he started losing weight, and we didn't know why. And so it took about 3 months. We had to go to some specialists. They found he had a kidney disorder, and fortunately, the doctors were able to diagnose it and was able to treat it and cure it. But all of that treatment, though we had insurance, was a real strain on our finances. Fortunately, when Thomas got better, was about the same time that Amy really started struggling with her health. And so we traded one set of doctors for the other.
It's about 2006. My disease started progressing, and I started feeling much worse. We saw all kinds of physicians to try and ascertain exactly what the problem was. Spent about 3 years trying to diagnose the illness, and in that time I had multiple tests, multiple hospitalizations. My disease began to attack different organs. I went to many, many physicians, and in about 2011, I was finally diagnosed.
She has a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, but also a component of something called mixed connective tissue disease. Now, autoimmune diseases are conditions in which the immune system is more active in certain areas of the body than it should be. And so when the immune system starts to recognize those tissues as potentially a threat, it starts a process of inflammation and attack as it would for a foreign invader, but unfortunately that inflammation actually leads to damage to the body's tissues. So with mixed connective tissue disease, we see many different types of inflammation in different areas. And unfortunately, Amy has suffered from many of those over the years, from the joint and muscle pains that she experiences to problems with other organ systems. All of those have the potential to cause symptoms for her, which can keep her from being able to do the things that she wants to do and can affect her quality of life, but can ultimately lead to damage that can affect her ability to live well for the long term, and in fact can affect her longevity.
I think the hardest thing for Amy in her illness is not the pain. As hard as that is, it's been missing out.
A lot of times, we can't go to church because Mom is sick, and a lot of times, if we get ELICH passes or something like that, we have to just go with Dad and Mom, in bed, and that's kind of all I've really ever known.
The disease is a thief. It just steals and steals and steals. And it's robbed so much from her, and the fact that she's not bitter about that is amazing, but she's had to miss out on a whole lot, and I feel that is the worst symptom of this disease.
Beginning part of my disease, I was on high doses of prednisone, and that kept my disease in check as far as keeping me stable, but it created a whole slew of other problems with it that required additional medications.
There are a lot of side effects that come along with the long-term use of prednisone. So she's suffered from many of those. That includes things like the increase in weight that happens with the use of prednisone. People gain weight in different areas of their body. It changes our metabolism. It decreases bone density, and she's suffered some from that. It increases the blood sugars, and there have been times where her blood sugars were high enough to almost meet criteria for diabetes because of the prednisone itself. So these are medicines that can be very effective and have been effective for her in terms of decreasing symptoms, but they're not medicines that we can use in the long term because they don't do a good enough job of keeping her doing well safely.
Most of the medications I'm on are disease-modifying medications. I'm on 2 chemotherapy drugs. I'm on drugs that combat the side effects of those drugs, like anti-nausea medications. I'm on medications for my lungs that help me to breathe. I'm on medications for my skin issues. The other problem with my disease is just that it's progressive, and sometimes it attacks some organs and other times it attacks others.
We had a real scare, one of her last hospitalizations. Whatever happened in that allowed her disease to cross into her brain, which it never had before. And it presented itself as like a stroke. She lost her ability to see and to speak and lost words, and it was terrifying. And that was one of the reasons why her doctors decided to finally try her on this new medication.
Most recently, her rheumatologist, her specialist in autoimmune type diseases, has recommended that she change to a medicine called etanercept, or the other name for that is Enbrel. Now, Enbrel is a newer and a different class of medicine. Instead of working very broadly on the immune system to shut down the effect of the immune system across the board, what etanercept does is it actually focuses on a very specific chemical pathway in the immune system, a chemical that's called TNF, or tissue necrosis factor. And the idea, if you can be very specific about it, if you can find a particular pathway that is important for that disease process, that leads to the inflammation that causes symptoms and long-term destruction, and you can shut that down, but you leave the remainder of the immune system intact, then it's a safer medicine. It's more of a magic bullet. It's able to actually get in and affect that one area. And so one of the things we found, particularly with rheumatoid arthritis, is if you combine Enbrel with other agents like methotrexate, which Amy also takes, it can significantly decrease the chances of her having symptoms on a daily basis, symptoms that are keeping her from doing what she wants to do, but also very importantly keeps her from having long-term damage that's going to lead to scar tissue. The big problem with these medicines, however, at this point in time, is that they're newer medicines, they're newer technology, and at this point in this country, they're very expensive.
2006 is when Amy's health really started to take a turn for the worse. When you're dealing with a mystery illness, you don't know which doctor you're seeing, what tests they're going to order, how long between appointments. A real concern for them, for Amy and Aaron, was to try to proactively address what was starting to happen with their exploding medical costs. In terms of financial planning, we were trying to be very proactive about planning for their increasing costs, the changes they could expect in their medical costs, and really, if things continued to be to a point where they became catastrophic, how we would handle that.
And so it's been a financial burden that it's been well over a decade, just building and building and building.
Amy's total health insurance and medical costs are over $24,000 a year. When you add a few $1,000s for medical insurance for Aaron and for Thomas, this family's total medical and health insurance cost for the year is over $29,000. That is without the very important Enbrel prescription that we would all like to see Amy be able to stay on.
So what we are asking for is about $14,000. What that will enable us to do is to pay off all of our medical debt, as well as pay for a year's supply of Enbrel. The hope is then we can take the money that we have been sending to the hospital for payments and set that aside to begin to save up for future Enbrel. We know that's a huge amount. Any little bit helps. If it's $10, that's awesome. If it's more, that's wonderful. But coming along beside us and helping us is such an encouragement for us to know that we're not in this alone.
Another thing that I'd like to let you know about is that the church elders and the church family as a whole are very supportive about this ask. And so it's important that we all understand that what we're doing is supporting them as a family. We're not underwriting anything that we wouldn't do for anybody else in the church.
It's hard to ask for help, and Aaron and I waited a long time to do this ask. We've been dealing with this disease for over 10 years. But one of the things I've learned throughout this disease is that we cannot exist and thrive in our lives without the help of others. And while I like to be on the giving end, and it's difficult to be on the receiving end, I do want to thank you for any gift that you can provide to us, and for your prayers, for your constant encouragement. When I see people around town, or you share a message on Facebook and you encourage me to keep going, It helps tremendously. It gives me energy, it gives me a lift in my spirit, and it just helps me to know that it's worth it to get up every day and to keep pushing forward. I'm tremendously grateful for our community and for our church family and for all the people that are generous enough to help us during this really difficult time.
You know, I'm very appreciative of projects like this where we try to help people attain access to a medication which is very expensive.
Thank you for giving whatever you can for Mom's miracle medicine. All I know is that it's bringing Mom back to what she used to be, and thank you for any gifts or anything you've given us. Thank you.